Good morning, my beautiful internet friends. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I wanted to talk about one particular aspect of purity culture that I was taught and I didn't really realize I was taught until recently, and that's the idea of suffering with a smile. Now, I understand that in theory this sounds like a good thing, right? Like it's a good thing to go through difficult things with a positive attitude, and to some extent I think that's absolutely accurate. I think a negative attitude has its place, and by that I mean it's okay to feel sadness and grief and anger and loss. But in chapter 1 in particular, we're gonna be talking about how idolized it was to basically always be happy, never show any emotion, even if you were in a ton of pain, and how much emotions were demonized. So without further ado, let's dive into part of chapter 1 of Pure by Linda Kay Klein, and as usual, I've said let's dive in before I've finish the intro, which is this video is supported by my amazing patrons over on my Patreon page, Dismantling Purity Culture. That page has a support group for those of us who have experienced purity culture. There are additional videos on this topic and early access to these videos. To everyone who is a member over there, thank you from the bottom of my heart. And if you're interested in supporting this type of video and this type of content, check out the link on screen or down in the description down below. So if you know anything about my life story, you know that I have experienced a decent amount of physical pain. I have migraines fairly often. I have chronic neck pain and I'm missing a leg. The reason I'm missing a leg is because I had 14 years of surgeries on my ankle, which is a pretty drastic decision to make. So being in physical pain or being sick is not something that I am new to. It's something that has very much been a part of my life since I was 13 and I fell off a horse. I've recently realized that the way that I went through so much of what I went through as a teenager with a smile, everything's okay. Yes, I'm having more ankle surgery and it sucks and that's a bummer, but it's all right, I'm all right, everything's fine. I'm realizing that the way that I persevered through those things, and there's something to be said about survival and getting through things, but the way that I got through those things was not particularly healthy for me because I didn't process the emotions behind what I was experiencing. I forced myself to be happy, easier for people to deal with. I'm sure my family might not feel the same way, but like anyone outside my immediate family, I was perfectly pleasant to all the time about what I was going through because I didn't want to ever make it seem like I was really upset or really hurting. So I just faked it and smiled. And Linda in this book tells a story of the time that she was dealing with serious gastrointestinal issues. She ended up having Crohn's disease, which is a very serious disease that not a lot was known about at the time. But this is what she writes about it. The doctor did a short scope and diagnosed me with IBS. But before I left his office, I remember him telling me that if my symptoms were as severe as I claimed them to be, I wouldn't be smiling so much. Clearly he had no experience with good Christian girls and our truly outstanding capacity for smiling. God, isn't that accurate? My girlfriends and I knew that it was our responsibility to represent Jesus to the non-Christian world. The word Christian, after all, means Christ-like. So if we were a drag, people would assume that Jesus was a drag. But if we were fun, we might entice someone to join the church and save them from eternal damnation. And so, even while we suffered, especially while we suffered, we smiled. One of the most common themes that arose in my interviews was the pain that those I spoke with felt and not being allowed to express their true feelings. Some of those I've spoken with said they eventually got so good at denying their feelings that they could no longer access them even when they wanted to. They couldn't touch their anger, their sadness, their pain. They couldn't even feel happiness. Let me know if you resonate with any of this, but this is something that hit me so hard. There are obviously a lot of factors that go into how we go through difficult things, how we survive challenging times. When I think about how I experienced all the physical pain that I experienced as a teenager, going through surgeries and things not working and walking and hurting and doing things anyways and pushing through, the reason that I learned to be that way was exactly what is written here, because good Christian girls don't look sad. Like maybe it's okay to look sad for a few minutes during a worship service that's especially emotional and someone will like come and pray over you, but it's not okay to actually not be okay to the outside world, or really even to the purity culture Christian church. I do want to make it clear that I'm not talking at all against Christianity in any of these videos. I don't have any problem with faith. I am a person of faith, but I do have a problem with beliefs that are twisted and made to be very dangerous and detrimental towards people, especially adolescents. What purity culture very effectively taught me is that I needed to be representative in every aspect of my life, whether it was the gender role that I had, my sexuality, whatever it is, I needed to be perfectly representative of their idea of what Jesus wanted to the outside world. And a big thing that was taught is that people will see the difference in your life by your actions. And this is something that's taught in Christianity, so this is straying a little bit from purely purity culture. But the way that I was taught that idea was to never really struggle, at least in a way that anyone else could tell. To not let suffering get to me. right? To still smile, to always still be okay, to always have joy in the Lord, to always be all right at the end of the day, because that is what was expected. That's what we wanted to portray to people who were outside the fold so we could bring them in. And the problem with that is that you condition yourself not to really feel things, because you shove anger down, you shove sadness down, you shove pain and hurt and everything that comes with that into a little box deep down, and you just keep smiling. And I've gotten so good at this that one of the reasons that I started my Footless Joe channel when I knew I was going to be losing my leg is because I knew that it was my knee-jerk reaction, something that was subconscious, to go through difficult things and pretend like they weren't having an effect on me. And the problem is that that eventually comes to an end. Eventually that comes crashing down around most people, at least I can speak for myself and say that shutting off my emotions and pretending that things were all right when they weren't, when it came to major things in my life, damn near killed me more than once. So I created the channel when I was going through amputation as a way to stay honest with myself and stay honest with other people, and it was effective. Like, it was a great tool for me. It is a great tool for me. But if you were taught that emotions were bad because you needed to portray a certain image to the outside world, first of all, I heard the same thing and I get it. I'm there with you. But understanding, as I've gone through the last couple years of trying to deconstruct this, that emotions are not a thing of the devil, that anger is not a Satan feeling. Every emotion you have, be it anger or sadness or rage or grief or joy or happiness or exuberance, is human. There aren't emotions that are of the devil, right? Like, people can choose to do good or bad things with the emotions that they're feeling. We can choose to do healthy or unhealthy things to hurt people or to help people. But emotions themselves are not bad, and expressing those emotions is not sinful, is not wrong. In fact, I think it's a very, very healthy, good thing to do if you're someone who believes in God. I honestly believe the God of the Bible is encouraging of emotions. It's just the way that people have translated it into our modern culture seems to stifle all of that. It's okay to be human. It is okay if you are feeling things. It's okay if you are suffering or going through something and you are not all right. You're not a failure. You're not a bad representation of your faith. You're not worthless if you're having a hard time and you let that show. In fact, the more I have lived, the more I have grown, the more I've realized moments where I can be vulnerable, where I can show people around me that I'm actually not okay and I actually don't know what to do about it and I don't have all the answers. Those moments have led to so much growth in my life and so much connection. When I was forcing joy all the time, like the story talks about, and I was smiling through absolutely everything, I was also miserably lonely, because I couldn't let anyone get close to me. I couldn't let anyone in to what was really going on because I wouldn't let myself into what was really going on. It's very isolating to eliminate emotions from your life in effort to fulfill a certain role or a certain image. And I can only speak on this as a woman growing up in the church. I'm not sure what men were taught about emotions, but I'm guessing it was probably just as bad. Let me know if you identify as a guy in the comment section down below and you've been through purity culture. I'm really interested to have more conversations with men in my life, or those who are non-binary or trans or LGBTQ+ about what it was like growing up in this sort of movement. Because here's the thing, I basically did this, right? Like, I did the good suffering Christian girl. I was gung-ho about Jesus and God. Like, I checked all the boxes from the outside, and yet I still felt so wrong and so broken and so, yeah, just so wrong. I'm gonna repeat myself on that one. And yet I was a heterosexual white woman living in purity culture where my sexuality wasn't at odds with what was being taught, where my gender identity wasn't at odds with what was being taught, and yet I still came out feeling horrible about myself. I think a lot of this purity culture conversation has started with white women. This book was written primarily interviewing white women, and she calls that out very clearly in the introduction, saying, hey, these are the people I talked to because this is the experience I had and I wanted to start somewhere, for better or worse. This conversation, I think, needs to expand to so many other groups of people than just white women, because it has affected thousands and thousands and thousands of lives. And that really breaks my heart. So thank you for spending a few minutes out of your day here with me today. I truly appreciate it. You could be anywhere in the world doing anything, and you chose to spend a few minutes with me, and I really appreciate that. I love you guys. I'm thinking about you, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, guys.